welcome everybody to the final session of today. We're really excited to hear from my good friend Derek Rao. First, I just want to take a second and appreciate the day. From my standpoint, now I've been jumping from room to room and scrambling in the background, but from my standpoint, it's been a really very cool and very special day. I'd love it if we just took a second to think about one big thing today, one big aha, one big insight, a cool tool, a cool prompt, or something. And I'd love for people to just drop something in the chat, a shout out from the day, a takeaway from the day, something that you want to remember for the next year or two going forward. I'd love to capture some of those thoughts here before we jump into our closing for the day. Pi.ai. We have a whole session on Pi.ai tomorrow for those of you who are excited about it. Joe Marquez, yeah, he brought it. Is cool. Yeah, when I first heard of Joe talking about AI citations, I loved it. I thought that was such a clutch suggestion. The myth of 13. Beware. Beware. Oh yeah, I heard great things about the murder mystery. Well done, Pavel. That was cool. Also heard great things. Lisa Snows got some great feedback as well. Well done, Lisa. All right, so these are some great shout outs. Feel free to keep pouring them in if you want. There's one shout out that I wanted to give. I wanted to say something earlier, but I didn't have too much time. There's somebody in this group I wanted to appreciate in particular. Let's see if I can get a click here. It's Taryn Krolick. I don't know if Taryn is here. I want to give her a shout out because she was our first person to sign up for SequoiaCon way back in the beginning of October. So Taryn, we are so grateful that you were our first attendee, and I want to buy you lunch tomorrow. So I'm going to email you and figure out how I can send you some DoorDash or something. When you start out things like this, you don't know if anyone's gonna come along, or if you're crazy for thinking that the world needs something. And we're just grateful for you all. I think Taryn was the first person who showed us okay, we might not be totally crazy. And so we're grateful for you and we're thankful. And we just want to say we, show our appreciation in a small way and buy you lunch tomorrow. So I'll reach out and figure out how. All right. Enough with the sappy stuff. Oh, no pun intended. The sappy stuff. So as I mentioned, we're really early on in this, and we've been thinking about what's the right thing that the world needs. And the cool thing about Evergreen is all of us have day jobs, and all of us are just trying to bring whatever we can to into the world that the world needs, and we don't want to make noise. There's enough noise in education, and there's enough other stuff in schools that we don't need to be extra. We just want to be filling the gaps if there are any. And something we've heard time and again is that, well, we've got months, years of work ahead of us, and a mountaintop experience like SequoiaCon is awesome. And I think we're all having a good time so far, and hopefully it's been worth your day, and by tomorrow worth your 2 days. But we also know that this is just the beginning, really, and that if if we're going to direct these, our collective ships in the right direction, it's going to take more dedicated effort and more probably long-term partnership, to be honest. And so, while we see this as us, this little sapling coming up, we want to try to grow into that family of sequoias and do that with groups of people. And so what we wanted to share with you all was a new program that we're going to start this summer, and we'd love to chat with some of you about it if it's of interest. It's called our AI Academy, and it's on our website if you want to scope it out. The idea of the AI Academy is it's actually going to be basically a year-long program. We're going to start in July. We're going to run it through May. So it's basically the whole 24-25 school year. And the idea is that it's really built for teams, maybe individuals, but groups of people is best, who are being tasked to lead their schools or their district's AI efforts in the school year to come. Our sense is that a lot of schools and districts have kind of put their head down, hoping that nobody noticed too much about what was going, nobody was making too much of a kerfuffle about AI. And our sense, and probably yours too, is that this can't continue. Like we have to take definitive action. And so what our hope is in the year to come is that we are going to actually come alongside a select few group of districts, and we're going to, on a cohort basis, so districts with districts and CTOs learning with CTOs and instructional technologists with others. You see our model, and going through this month by month focused kind of a sprint on particular topics that must be covered by district if they're going to have a meaningful AI implementation at the end of this upcoming school year. And if you heard Joe, he really was telling us he's kind of like Paul Revere telling us the British are coming, we've got to do something here. And this is our answer. And so what we want to do is we actually want to bring together some of the genius that you've seen at SequoiaCon and sprinkle it out over the course of a year, put groups of people together that are within the district or within teams, and get them thinking and working together on how do we want to do AI in our district? How do we want to do it in our county, or in some cases in our private school? And so what's cool about this is you're going to get to focus on really the big 10 things that have to be done in order to have a meaningful AI implementation. And the other piece that we're going to allow schools to do, or participating districts to do, teams to do, is allowed them to pick these specializations. And so these are 15. There might be more, to be honest. But we know everybody has their own. They have their own needs, their own priorities based on where they are and what their state mandates might be, what their parents are saying. And so we want to also allow everybody who's in the program to specialize and pick the things that they really want to make sure that they solve for and they really nail in the year to come, and doing that in a way that is AI informed and AI leveraged. AI is not going to be an answer for everything, but for every one of these things, there is something that could be done better or more efficiently with AI. And we want to spend some time with experts looking at each of these, and allowing any participating schools and teams to say, okay, we want to pull in some ELD stuff, we want to pull in some staff wellness, we want to pull in some deep dive data work, because that's what's really important to us. And another district might choose something totally different. What's cool about this is the same courses are also going to be a part of what we call our Week of AI. And so in July, I know most people are dreaming of July right now, and you couldn't imagine going to a couple of sessions, but we think it's a nice quiet time for anybody who wants to spend some time on these things and on these things alone. So it's going to be really accessible. We're driving down our price point so that anyone can do it. We think it's going to be like $30 a course or something, very, very reasonable and accessible. And if you have department heads or tech teams, administrators, somebody who's in charge of student support services or differentiation or attendance, they can come and they can focus for a couple of hours on a particular topic, again trying to figure out how AI can help them do what they need to do better, faster, cheaper. And so that's kind of what's coming that's our summer really for look ahead for Evergreen, and then the fall, right? And so we're going to have a mini Sequoia, our fall camp, which will be in late October. It'll be a shorter, sweeter, more focused time, a nice kickoff for the year. You could do all these. You could do mix and match of these, and this one I think would be good for some of the people who aren't here, and you're like, I wish so and so was here. This can be a great opportunity for them to be at the fall camp. It'll be cheaper, more accessible, and but still a really high quality experience with some of the faces that are here this week. And that's kind of the future. That's what Evergreen's looking like. We are open to suggestions, to feedback. If this is noise, tell us that. If you think this is genius, unlikely, but tell us that too. We just want to know what y'all need, and if it's not this, that's fine. We don't need to put a bunch of junk out. We just want to be helpful, and you all can help us figure out what's helpful and what's not. So please, this is an open open space with me. Reach out. Most of you have my email. If not, you can chat me right now. Tell me what you think, and we'll take it from there. All right. So now I get a distinct pleasure of introducing an old friend. If you can't tell, this is a very young Derek Rao. Before he was a doctor and before he had a beard. The cool thing is Derek and I, we grew up in the same hometown. We went to the same high school, so we've known each other for well over 20 years. And it's just such a pleasure to get to work with him on Evergreen. I've come to know Derek over the years as a man of so many talents, and really is excellent at so many different things. It's hard to account for them all, but most of all, he's just a good friend, and he's such a joy to work with. He has such a high standard and does such good work. And he cares. Most of all, he cares. He cares about kids and schools, about public education, about people, about the well-being of teachers and families and communities. And he's somebody that I've just really enjoyed getting to work on Evergreen with. And so the real intro for Derek, besides this silly fishing one, is this one. He's the director of technology at New View School. New View is a really cool and innovative district in Southern California. We're going to actually get to hear from Derek and his superintendent and a board member tomorrow, and to have like a really candid and open conversation about what does it look like to start from scratch with AI, and to really prioritize it, to build a task force around it, to free up 10 people to be at this conference. I mean, it has been a serious investment from New View, including letting Derek participate in some of the Evergreen activities. And so we're so grateful to have Derek, to have New View as a in-kind supporter of so many things, and really just the brain power here, and the passion, the insight is something that I think everybody can learn from. So without too many more accolades, because his head will get even bigger than it already is if I continue, I'll pass over to my dear friend Derek Rao.
All righty. Thank you for that, Ryan. The picture of the one fish I've ever caught is you found it. All right, is my screen coming through?
It is, but it's not your full screen. It's you could make your browser a little bit bigger if you wanted. Cover the whole.
Try that again. Might be a little box, but that's all right.
Yeah, perfect.
Cool. All right. So I'm here to talk a little bit about high impact transformations and how we might be able to unleash the full potential of AI. But before I do that, I'd like to just do a little 2-minute arriving exercise, if you're willing. So if you're anything like me, a long day of PD, maybe even especially if it's virtual, can be pretty exhausting. So If you'd like and are willing, you can turn off the camera or close your eyes, and let's just kind of settle in for a couple minutes with a little guided mindfulness practice and really reflect on the day and our learnings and feel just the gratitude for everyone in the room and all of the hard work that went on behind the scenes from, Ryan's perspective and the Evergreen team, but also all of our presenters who, really delivered their A game. So let's take the opportunity. I encourage you to find a comfortable seated position, either in your chair or on a sofa or on the floor. And I encourage you to relax your body and close your eyes. Again, if you feel comfortable doing so. And start by taking a deep breath in through your nose and feeling the air fill up your lungs, and then hold it for a few moments, and then slowly exhale through your mouth, releasing any tension or stress that you may be carrying. And as you continue to breathe deeply, bring your awareness to some of the sensations in your body. Notice any areas of tension or discomfort. And with each exhale, just invite them to slowly, release that tension and relax. And we'll continue practicing like this for a few moments. And as you feel your jaw loosen and your shoulders maybe sag, you can start to bring a little energy, maybe wiggle your toes, and begin to arrive back in the room for this final session of our first day. And when you're ready, if you'd like to open your eyes or come back on camera, whatever's meaningful to you, thank you for obliging. So as Ryan mentioned, I am your ranger for this final keynote session. I'm Derek Rao. I'm the Director of Technology of Newview Union School District. We are a small but mighty district in Southern California. And if you are going to be with us for day two, please feel free to stop by. We're going to be, like Ryan said, my superintendent and board president will be in a panel with us tomorrow morning. So you'll hear from much greater speakers than myself, that's for sure. I'd love to start. So, my title is on transformations and the ones that are maybe open to us now through the advent of AI. But I'd like to start actually with the anatomy of a transformation, or if you want to, substitute innovation, feel free to do so. So I'm sure there's a formal definition, for both of those terms, but I hadn't seen one. And for whatever reason, for years, true story, I have always pictured the suitcase as a very transformative and innovative product. Not necessarily this type of luggage. So luggage or, foot lockers or suitcases have existed, probably millennia, as has the wheel. I'm sure that even predates luggage. But there's something about transformation where you combine two things that have existed in their own worlds, independent of each other for a long, long time. And when you put them together, you get, something transformed or something innovative. And what's crazy to me about this, the reason I've, maybe it's from traveling or whatever, but what's always blown me away is that this innovation, a rolling suitcase, has existed in my lifetime. So my dad's luggage was the big, kind of clamshell carry ones with no wheels on it. And despite both of these, the regular luggage and a wheel having existed separately forever, it took, until somewhere, I don't know, 70s, 80s, 90s, that company started to really adopt this. And now you couldn't imagine carrying a huge handled luggage through an airport or wherever on a trip without, being able to wheel it around. So that's sort of the lens I've had for building out the keynote address, thinking through AI like that. I feel like some of these transformations are really, you take things that have existed separately, like instruction. So in section one, I'm going to talk about, good instruction has existed way before AI. As long as there's been students, there's been good teachers. And this concept of breathing room and wanting to not just be doing, but also, having a natural rhythm to work and to study have both existed. But AI allows us to maybe combine those. And then in part two, I'll talk about how we combine personalized learning with some embedded cognitive science strategies. And then in part three, I'll talk about combining feedback and meaningful feedback with, an activated community. So let's dive into better instruction and more breathing room. So I saw we have some new view peeps in the house. Apologies, because you've probably seen this slide a dozen times. But this is a example of an instructional strategy that a partner and I developed, gosh, a little bit before COVID. So at the time, I was an instructional math coach at the secondary level, a teacher on special assignment in Southern California. And my partner, same title, and I were really struggling with helping our teachers make the shifts that the Common Core required. So if you're not a secondary math teacher in the room, one of the shifts of the Common Core for math was helping students understand math at the conceptual level, because math for so long had just been about following, the algorithms and putting numbers into formulas and sort of computing. So there was a shift from sort of procedural fluency to help students develop conceptual fluency. And my partner and I thought, like, how do you get, this was a pretty large district, 26 schools, and we were secondary math, so that's sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade, algebra 1, algebra 2. We had a lot of sections in which we wanted to help teachers develop this skill, and we were thinking, how do we do it? So we were very intentional and very kind of thoughtful about designing something that had to meet some criteria. Like, it had to cost basically nothing. So that's why you can see the sticky notes. It had to be able to be implemented in like 2 minutes or less. We knew we couldn't ask teachers to take up their time is so encroached upon. So there's no way we could ask teachers to take up 10 minutes, 15 minutes of a lesson. And we wanted it to be something that they did regularly. So it's like, it's got to be like 30 seconds or 2 minutes. And yeah, it's got to have ready-made materials and promote conceptual understanding. So we came up with this idea called sticky math. Again, not necessarily a genius idea or anything, but we were really proud of it. And when we tested it out with teachers, they loved it. So what's happening here is on the left sticky note, you have an equation, right? Just math written out. 4 squared equals 16. There's nothing to solve here. The math is already done for the students. It's just, written in its sort of abstract mathematical form. And then on the right side, we had sort of a pictorial representation, or like a concrete photo or something like that. Something that really embodied what's happening there. And the middle sticky note, or if teachers didn't even want to buy sticky notes, you could divide a whiteboard into 3 sections, or you could fold a piece of paper into thirds, right? Like, this was low tech, low cost. But the point of that empty middle space is for students to annotate their thinking. So, they would jot down their thoughts. Where do they see the 4? Oh, it's, if I kind of count to the side, I have 4 blocks. Oh, if I count down, I have 4 blocks. Where do you see the 2? Oh, that's kind of like 2 dimensions. I can go, 4 to the right or 4 down. Where do you see the 16? And so on. So the only thing that students could do, because the math was done for them, there was nothing to solve here. We were just eliciting their conceptual understanding. So the only way they could approach this was at the conceptual level. So this was something we were really proud of. And again, the teachers that we tested it out with, early adopters, super flexible and loved to try things out. But they were like, this is great. Kids have fun with it. It's a little break in the regular day, and it's getting at that conceptual understanding. The problem is that even for 2 people, my partner Dave and I, we were out of the classroom. So even for 2, teachers on a special assignment who didn't have classroom teaching responsibilities, it took us months. You could imagine wanting to build out a year of these to be used as like warm-ups or bell ringer activities. So a year of these addressing all the different standards for all the secondary grades of math. It took literal months of us. We didn't actually ever fully complete a full year for each of these. And when ChatGPT came around, that was my first prompt. So Ryan, I think, remember that it was probably chat, 1.5 or so. And I was like, gosh, like, for whatever reason, my head went back there, because we were really proud of that. And we had presented at conferences on this and stuff. And I was like, I bet this would make my life a little easier there. So my very first prompt was providing a lot of context. You don't need to read this whole thing, but if you do kind of focus on that last sentence where I say, I give the context for what that activity is. And then I say, if I provide a CSV file of every secondary Common Core math standard, can you create 5 examples of sticky math activities for each? And within about 3 minutes, it did. So, I mean, that was where my eyes exploded with like, this is going to be a transformational technology as big as the internet, maybe bigger, really revolutionary, because that was something that took, there's a lot of value into crafting better emails or writing, generating better lesson plans and a lot of the other time savers that AI can do. But this was something that saved months of time of 2, full FTEs working on this and the dollars that are associated with that, the other, and more importantly than maybe the dollars and the person hours and all of that, is it was good instruction. It's what we wanted to be happening in our district schools anyway. So right away, we just saw the power that this is something different than just faster emails or nice clean lesson plans or helping me make slide presentations more quickly and at a better format or something. This is something that could really revolutionize systematic changes that we were trying to do in math
Gonna
instruction.
build a house? Let's do it like this.
So then, let me run if you wouldn't mind mute. I thought, okay, I'm a secondary math teacher. That's sort of the lens that I see things. What would that look like in other subjects? So I will show you what it looks like in other subjects. Can you see, Ryan, the ChatGPT window now? Okay. So I'll just ask ChatGPT, are you familiar with the game? Oops. 2 truths and a lie. I'll fix that typo. And of course, ChatGPT is going to say, yeah, it's a common icebreaker or something like that. It's familiar with it. Then I'll feed it the prompt. I want to play something similar in an English language arts classroom as a way to use ChatGPT to enhance students' understanding of literature. Let's call it 2 themes and a lie. If I provide a piece of literature, please come up with 3 themes, 2 that are actually supported by textual evidence and 1 that doesn't quite fit. Can you do that? I thought I do have a minor in English, so I've taught a couple of sections of middle school English throughout my career. And I know that like getting students to understand the main topic or the theme of a piece at all grade levels is just really, really difficult. So absolutely, it sounds like a creative and engaging way to explore literary themes. Please provide a piece of literature you'd like to use, and I'll come up with 3 themes for 2 themes and a lie. So let's say The Great Gatsby. And just right away, in perfect, correctness, it comes up with the actual themes of The Great Gatsby, right? The American dream and the corruption of wealth. And then, for secondary students, the thing that they always jump at is something like this, right? So it even knows almost the mistakes that students make, the redemptive power of love. That's not really, it's a negative aspect in the story, if anything. So I was like, gosh, that's really impressive. How scalable is that? Well, that, again, let's say now I'm a secondary English language arts TOSA. So I'm going to give it a 1st grade text. Pete the cat, I love my white shoes. And again, by providing the context in a prompt, and I don't want this to be a prompt engineering session. You all have had that and are, like Ryan said, early adopters yourselves, but super scalable transformations that instantly would, almost, like you almost want to say revolutionize language arts instruction in classrooms. And not only that, but the time at which they save. So, if you're an English teacher, if you're a math teacher, the time that now you have back in your life, you can become a better teacher with less of a time constraint, not so that you can fill that time up with other like tasks, but just so that you have like more balance and more sense of being and wellness. So to that point, about breathing room, that the efficiency, not only is it giving us better content, but it's doing it in a more efficient way. I had never done a guided meditation, so I have no idea how that landed, 10 minutes ago or whatever. That was actually the first time I've ever done one ever. I do meditate and have listened to guided meditations. But at about 2 p.m. today, I asked ChatGPT that I've never led a guided meditation, but would you like to try I would like to try one during a keynote session. And I printed out exactly what it gave me. So what becomes possible for me that, I would have rated myself a D- meditator. But now with a tool like this, I'm somebody that, it was a little nerve-wracking to do that in front of adults and in a setting that I've, never done before. But like, surely I could do this in front of my students, a 1 minute guided meditation every day to kind of just center them and calm them. And would that have an impact of um, outcomes like detentions or suspensions, or maybe even academic achievement? Probably not after the first week, but if you've got 180 days to stack up, a 2-minute activity here, a 2-minute mindfulness activity here, and you're not spending hundreds of hours to develop those activities, it's a game changer. It's an absolute game changer. As I know I'm preaching to the choir here. So let's move on to number 2 about personalized learning and embedding cognitive science strategies. So my first slide here is a little bit of a bone to pick about formative assessment. So there's nothing wrong necessarily with informative assessment, but I do feel like it's sort of a dated paradigm, and that AI is behind one of the driving forces of maybe pushing it beyond its usefulness. Formative assessment to me is a very passive way of adapting your instructional strategies or your interventions for students. But what it requires is for you to deliver a lesson or have students engage with some sort of learning activity, then assess which ones did and did not understand, then, kind of group them into interventions, and then deliver those interventions. So much has happened. 100% of formative assessment has happened after the lesson. You deliver the lesson, then formative assessment starts. You see how it landed. You see how students performed on maybe a short quiz or an exit ticket. You make adjustments to your instruction for the next day. Maybe you group students differently. You know the drill. What AI allows is, call it predictive assessment, call it whatever you want, but a total reversal of what's possible. So when you think about what formative assessment is getting at is differentiating or individualizing learning, right? It's recognizing that not all learners will receive the same lesson and come away with it understanding that content to the same degree. And then what, right? Like, what are your next moves as a teacher to remediate that? So thinking about what differentiation is at its core, I think, again, I'm sure the smarter people than me will be able to add a step here or there. But I feel like the phases of differentiation is that you've got to be able to identify and anticipate student misconceptions. So knowing the common misconceptions within your material and the gaps of understanding or readiness to the curriculum amongst your learners. So as an example of this, again, I was a math teacher. So when students add fractions, the most common mistakes they make are blank, blank, and blank, right? There's only a few ways that it's even possible to add fractions wrong. I don't need to deliver a fraction lesson to know that some subset of my students are going to add them wrong. And of the ones that add them wrong, they're going to add it wrong 3 different ways. They're going to add the numerator, the denominator, whatever. So phase 2, what am I going to do about that? So if I know that some of my students are going to add fractions wrong and they're going to do it in these certain ways, what remediations, what interventions, what tiers of support am I going to do to address that misconception? So, for type 1 errors of fraction adding, that's where students don't find a common denominator. They just add the numerator and the denominator together. So for those students, here's what I'll do. I'll sit with them in a small group. There's a great video of somebody who explains that really well, whatever. But again, this is all happening before the lesson. I can identify the misconceptions that my students have and identify what I'm going to do about it. Then I give the lesson. And the lesson is meant to match my learners, right? I know they're going to come with these misconceptions or these gaps. I know what I'm going to do about those gaps. Now I just need to say, oh, Derek, you're the type of student who adds numerators and denominators together. So here's your remediation for that. You know, Carrie or Rocky or Beckett, you go into group B and C. Or, you know, Beckett, you're actually, you know, you're adding these great and ready for some enrichment or some extension activities. So totally different than my experience with formative assessment, where so much of that steps 1 and 2, the meat of the work happened before the lesson's ever delivered. And the purpose of the lesson, you could even say the purpose of your lesson is to identify and match learners to the different remediations. Which student, like I know 40% of my students are not going to add fractions correctly. I know I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to address that. So let's find out which 40% they are. And let's start matching students to remediations. Again, I considered myself a fairly good middle school math teacher, but it's a totally different way of instruction than what was possible when I was in the classroom, grinding out lessons and build, you know, recording video content and trying to flip my classroom and stuff like this. This is just really more proactive. And then I would say the last step is to facilitate a meaningful sense of progress for the student, right? So if you know a student has this error that they make and you address it, how are you communicating back as the teacher that they're making progress in growing this skill and remediating that error? So being an AI conference, you can imagine every single one of these can be supercharged by AI. I don't need to spend hours of my time to identify all the possible misconceptions in my content. I can, you know, I wasn't a foreign language teacher, but I can say, what are the main misconceptions of Spanish learning students when conjugating verbs that end in IR? And ChatGPT spits out the answer that, you know, one of them, it spit out 3 examples for me. One of them was it was a preterite tense conjugation. So what can I do? Okay, so thank you. You've helped me identify what misconceptions exist. Now I'm going to ask, you know, the chatbot, what can I do to support a child who has that misconception? And again, I'm not going to, you know how to use ChatGPT, but it can tell you what your misconceptions are. It can tell you what to do about them. Like how much time as a teacher does that free so that all you're doing is matching? And, you know, as long as you anonymize the data, if Laurel's in the room and it got to be over 13, but as long as you're anonymizing the data, you can even make some real headway, right, with analyzing and matching students to that 3rd phase. So let's just look at one simple example of cognitive science. So Dr. Agarwal, if you we've had great sessions, but if you can make tomorrow's morning keynote, please do. So she's written the book, literally the book on cognitive science and how you deploy it in an educational system. So I'm going to just give this prompt that my students are learning the states and their capitals with the goal of incorporating spaced retrieval practice. So that's a cognitive science term in which you're spacing the lessons out to help memory and helping students retrieve things from their mind. Can you come up with a list of fun retrieval exercises that I can lead with them and also a schedule of appropriate spacing? So again, never taught elementary to know, you know, I know states and capitals are a thing, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 activities just like that to help students retrieve the capitals, as well as a recommended spacing, because, you know, every educator knows you don't just tell somebody something one time and they remember it forever, right? You need to space it out and interleave and go back and forth. So, you know, going back, we're combining personalized learning, differentiation with cognitive science strategies. And now we're the best teacher we've ever been, with working half the time we've ever worked. And then finally, I'll finish here with meaningful feedback and community activation. And this is the one that's probably the most abstract. I was really struggling, just to be transparent, on like how to get this out of my mind onto a slide. But there's this concept of something called the core value unit in app development. So I worked at a tech startup in Boulder for a while. That company exposed me to this idea. And it's something that, like, I just, ever since being exposed to that, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it in terms of K-12 education. So in an app, let's just say any app on your phone, you probably have these 3 things. You have a producer, you have a consumer, and then you have what they produce and consume. That's called the core value unit. So just to give a quick example, Uber, if you have Uber in your phone, the producer is the driver, The consumer is the passenger. So the core value unit of Uber is the ride. The whole interaction relates to this ride. One person produces the ride, one person consumes the ride. You can see they exchange. I'll give you a transportation and a rating. You'll give me money and a rating in return. But this is true for every platform you encounter. YouTube, you have a creator and you have a viewer. The core value unit is video content. I'll create the video for you. You'll comment, like, or subscribe. What is it? And I'd like to just pause. It looks like we were okay on time, but just take a few minutes. You've probably never, even been exposed to a core value unit or something that kind of esoteric, but just take a minute to think about, now that you've kind of gotten a couple samples, what would that be for education? What's the thing that we're interacting around? I gave you the, obviously the producer and the consumer. The producer is the teacher, the consumer is the student. Another factor of platforms is that these roles can change at any time, right? Like I can be a driver for Uber in the morning, and then I can be a passenger in the evening. Same is true for Airbnb, YouTube. I can post videos, I can watch videos. So maybe think about that too. Can the roles change in our educational system? But what are we producing around? What's the core value unit of the enterprise of what we're doing? And if you wouldn't mind taking a couple moments and posting to the chat, I would love to see some thoughts. I'm gonna push on. So Sean, love the idea of learning, right? Like, oh darn it, my slide went. My slide advanced, rats. So I think it's feedback. I think learning. I saw some of the responses. I'll push back on anybody who says it's a lesson plan, because a lot of great days are wasted with lesson plans. Students didn't learn anything and teachers just really struggled to create them and, labored over something that wasn't actually useful. Learning, I saw that in the chat. I think that's meaningful, right? There's not a right answer to this. It's just a little thought exercise. But learning, it just felt like that's not something I can impact. In a short term, right? Like learning is sort of a lagging metric, how much students learn. But I can impact how much feedback I give to students. All of human learning in my, appraisal centers on feedback. When I learned to change the brakes, it wasn't feedback from a professor that taught me if I did it right. It was whether the brakes squealed, after starting it back up. When I deliver a lesson on solving binomials, how I know how well I did is the feedback from the students, both in their immediate expression of feedback, right? But also in the feedback that I get through their scores and through their competencies and mastery tests. So if feedback is this thing that if we can just, right, like all Uber wants to do is have a ride and a ride and a ride. This one interaction, they want to happen 1 billion times, and then they'll be worth $1 billion. YouTube, same thing. They just want video content, that interaction, somebody producing, somebody consuming, to happen over and over and over. I would argue that what we want to happen over and over and over is a teacher delivering feedback to a student, getting feedback on that over and over and over. Like just these micro interactions with teacher and student. And I think there's a way that we can supercharge that with AI, right? Certainly through ChatGPT, but also through sort of releasing some forces that are just lying dormant. So another thing I've learned is that, before Uber came along, there were clearly people who were ready to be a taxi driver at any moment. Same with Airbnb. There were people who were ready to run a bed and breakfast. But it was like a dormant, latent resource that just wasn't activated because the technology wasn't there. All of a sudden, Uber comes along and says, hey, you do enough of these rides, you can make a little extra money on the side. And boom, we found out overnight how many people were willing to be a taxi driver for another person using their own personal car, or how many people were willing to create videos and share on social media ad nauseum, right? So what resources lie dormant in our school? Probably a lot, and it's probably different system to system. But, I think of this picture of a dam. The resource would be sort of upstream in the reservoir, and it's just waiting to explode through the gates if the technology would come along and open the gates. But I think we have a lot of resources in our systems that are just sitting at the reservoir level and never having a chance to open the gates. So where I'm going with this is families. I think our communities, our teachers are incredible. They are not latent. Our principals, I've never met a principal, a counselor, a health clerk, a registrar, you name it. School district employees, I would not call latent, dormant resources. I think they're some of the most overworked people in America. But, and I would also extend that to parents. Parents are often overworked and struggling to cope with all of life's challenges as well. But, we can do a lot better job engaging them and sort of releasing that energy into our system as well. So just one quick example. In class this week, my students are learning about two-step equations. I would like to create a parent's guide similar to a teacher's edition for this topic that walks parents through common misconceptions and how to address them, right? Will every parent do this? If you send a parent square notice or an email or Google Classroom, whatever you use to communicate with families, will 100% of your parents engage with this? Of course not. But what would it look like if every night 5% or 10% of your families were actually engaging with this? Gosh, I bet you would see a difference in student outcomes. And 18 months ago, you would have had to spend years thinking through all your lessons and building the parent companion for them. But with the push of an enter button, today, I can have something that I would want to proofread and format and put it in a shareable format or whatever. But just an instant parent guide that even if you sent it as is better than nothing, which is what is probably being sent home. Would most parents want to support their kids learning fractions? Yeah. Have a lot of parents forgotten how to do them themselves and common denominators and all that nonsense? Probably, yeah. So a little refresher that you send home that takes you half of a day to build out your entire year could probably be pretty transformative. So yeah, that's really all I have. I really appreciate your guys' engagement in this conference with each other and just really leaning into AI as a whole. We do have time. I don't know if there's any. I want to say too, our district. I'm really proud of where we are, which is knowing that we're at the starting line here. I'm not speaking from a place of a fully activated district where we've really solved this problem and all of our parents get parent guides for every lesson being taught or anything like that. I'm just trying to start the seed some ideas of what's possible when you sort of combine, like a suitcase and a wheel, combine some things that have existed forever in our systems, but maybe haven't been released yet en masse.
So good, Derek. I love so many new thoughts and just the simple insight that of luggage and what does that look like for how we use AI to do the things that are evergreen. Sorry to use the word again, but they're the things that they don't change. Good instruction doesn't change overnight because now we have a tool that can spit out a statistically accurate statement, right? So I love that adding using it to leverage what's already good and what we already know. We already have some best practice around, I think is so good. I'll give the group a second or a minute to think if there are any questions or maybe any pushback. Is there any place where
deliver that to Ryan?
Maybe
only
I'll take the pushback. Any places where maybe it feels like an oversimplification or anything.
Yeah, that's a great point. In all seriousness, that's we're not trying to candy code anything or say like, oh, by August 2024, you're going to solve the achievement gap.
Yeah, but I think feel free to comment if you want, or if you want to throw up your hands. I know Derek's very happy to hear another point, because I mean we sit in so many different spots, right, across the country, across the world. it'd be really interesting to know, for our collective wisdom and insight, is there something else that we should be thinking about here? There's a comment from Tom here.
Tom, don't I know? So I'm a director of technology, and I say that all the time. It's like, when are these time savings going to actually manifest?
Well, I agree, Derek. I think this is 10x thinking, or maybe x to the 10 or something. I think there's a real mind shift that we can see here in your thinking, and I think if we approach all of our AI work with a sense of leveraging what we already know to be true, and a lens of scaling what works, and also tapping into where some latent possibilities are with families and the like. I think that's great. Love the specific examples. I think sticky math is something everyone should steal and use. And yeah, maybe Derek, you could throw up the survey for the end of the day. I know you're probably itching to drop, especially you East Coasters. It's a late evening. I don't know if our Europe folks are still up, but if you want to do the survey for Derek and anybody else that today that you might have missed, I know they'd appreciate the feedback. We would too. As I said to one group, it helps us to know what's landing and what isn't. If we're going to do more of something and less of another, that's where your input is just so helpful. So yeah, you can also add general feedback on there. It doesn't have to be about a particular session. It can just be about how your day went, or something we can do better tomorrow. Happy to hear that as well. But other than that, I think we'll say good night, and can't wait to see you in the morning.